Hi everyone, welcome to Bonnie Carolee Makes Cards. Today's cards feature 3 different color palettes using the adorable Spellbinders Santa's Fireplace. There are so many wonderful details included to create a festive look. Whether you would like to make an elegant card or one that is more fun and playful, Santa's Fireplace has it covered. So let's get started. I began with lots of die cutting. I did cut the fireplaces on my Big Shot, but for all the other die cutting, I was able to sit comfortably at my workstation with my sidekick. This made the task of die cutting all of those small detail pieces times 3, so there was a lot more time efficient. To keep all of these little bits and pieces somewhat organized, I piled my die cuts for each of the cards just on a piece of copy paper. You can probably see that I'm using some odd-shaped pieces of cardstock. This project was a good way to start using up some of that cardstock left over from other projects that I couldn't bring myself to throw away. To create a background reminiscent of wallpaper, I will be using Simon Says Stamps Blossom Field embossing folder. For the card with the Santa, I'm going to apply Distress Oxide ink old paper to the flat side of the embossing folder. To create a smooth finish, I use my brayer to roll out the ink. For Simon's thick embossing folders, when using a Big Shot, I just use the platform and a piece of cardstock underneath the embossing folder. The plates are not used at all. Santa's Fireplace comes with a die that cuts the foreground. There are notches for the placement of the fireplace and also an opening for the sentiment, of which there are several choices. I like to use a little bit of Post-it note tape to hold that sentiment die so that it is centered in the opening. For the card fronts without the Santa, I've die cut the fireplace twice. For the card with the pink accents, I'm using pearlized gold cardstock. There are 3 dies for added features to the fireplace. Die cuts are being adhered to the back of one of the fireplaces to provide a background for the detail work. The second fireplace will be adhered to the top of the first one, adding just a little bit of dimension. Now for the accents for the front of the fireplace. I begin by adding the moldings around the base. Adhering the molding first helps with the placement of the second die cut. This die cut shadows the inside of the pedestal of the fireplace and gives it depth. Before assembling any of the cards, I put the fireplaces together for the other 2. The fireplace for the card with the blue accents was put together in exactly the same way, except I used matte gold cardstock. I wanted the fireplace box to be dark. The fireplace die was lined up on the edge of the gray cardstock where the pedestal would meet the foreground. So all 3 cards are assembled in exactly the same way. I am going to go ahead now and move over to the card with the Santa because that fireplace is put together a little bit differently. So you can see I've got a bit of a mess on my background, but that's going to be covered up. I actually tried cutting out the fireplace in foam to provide some dimension, but it stretched out too much and I was unable to get it lined up. This card has a cute interactive element, so I needed a third fireplace, die cut from black cardstock and mounted on foam strips. I have also trimmed the center portion of the detail work. The Santa is comprised of 2 die cuts, his legs and then the bottom of his coat. On the legs there is a small die cut hole. I put a foam square through that. I did have to trim it down a bit and attach the coat to it. I then attach the back of the foam square to a small die-cut circle, which was then adhered to the card. I let the glue set up for a couple of minutes and then tested it to make sure that those legs were swinging freely. The front of the fireplace was constructed in exactly the same way as the previous one. 2 die cuts stacked together and the detail work done in silver matte cardstock. Of course, no logs and flames for this card. I skip right over to the grill. I'm going to attach it with foam squares that have been cut in half to give a little bit of dimension. For the garland at the top of the mantle, I use 3 swags of the greenery. I use the same swags, but this time 4 pieces to create a wreath. Next, I attach my 2 red stockings, which are going to be topped off with some glitter paper detail, the same white glitter paper that was used to trim out the Santa. Oh, and I hope that you've noticed his glitter boots because they are the cutest. Both the garland and the wreath are finished off with little red berry die cuts and poinsettias. When working with all of these little tiny die cuts, I like to use a jewel picker. I find it much easier than working with tweezers. 2 pairs of matte silver cardstock candlestick holders are added to either side of the wreath. I like to start by placing the tall ones first so that I can get them evenly placed, and then add in the small ones beside them. The candles have 2 die cuts. The candle with the flame was cut out of yellow glitter paper and then topped up with the second die cut out of white glitter paper. I'm just blown away by all of the amazing details in this set. I'm trimming down a little bit of the greenery that I'm going to place on the hangers of each of the stockings, and then they will be finished off with a red berry and a poinsettia. Of course, this is a Christmas card, and so there's never enough sparkle and shine. So I'm going to add some silver lining Nouveau drops to the centers of all of the poinsettias, and then I'm going to top up all of the berries with white blizzard glitter drops. Here we go, Santa in action. And that wraps up these cards featuring Santa's Fireplace by Spellbinders. This was last month's large die of the month, but I double-checked to make sure that it was still available, and it is. Links to Santa's Fireplace and other supplies used to make these cards can be found in the description of this video on YouTube or on my blog at bonniecarolee.com. As always, I appreciate your visit.